They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. Just stood there at the edge of the gravel, arms folded, clipboards pressed to their chests like shields. The morning sun cut sharp lines across their faces. 4 of them. HOA board members. Self-appointed neighborhood defenders. They looked at the half-built foundation like it was a threat. He didn't stop working. Just kept hammering in silence, sweat tracing old scars down his forearms. Dirt clung to him like memory. Every strike of the hammer echoed off the empty lots around him, the kind of sound that used to mean progress. Now it felt like defiance. The youngest one, maybe in her 20s, stepped forward and cleared her throat. He didn't look up. Didn't need to. He already knew what they came to say. They called it an unauthorized development. They said the permits weren't on file. They used words like zoning violation, structure height limits, noncompliance. One even took a photo with her phone like she was collecting evidence at a crime scene. He paused, set the hammer down slow, walked to the edge of the trench, wiped his hands on his jeans. When he spoke, his voice was calm, like steel pulled from ice. "You're making a mistake." They laughed. Laughed like he was some stubborn contractor refusing to play by their suburban rules. One of them, Lisa, the HOA president, held out a bright orange notice. Cease and desist. It snapped in the wind like a flag before battle. He didn't take it. Lisa's voice turned sharp. She said if construction continued, he'd face escalating penalties. Legal action. Daily fines. He finally looked up at her. Eyes tired, but unshaken. She flinched, just for a second. "I have every right to build here." She didn't blink. Said if he had proof, he better show it. He didn't. He couldn't. Not to them. Not without breaching the contract that came with classified ink. They left the notice pinned to a fence post and walked away, heels cracking against the dirt like gunshots. That night, the silence around his property felt heavier. The lights inside his house stayed off. He didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Just sat at the table, fingers tracing the blueprints with the same reverence most give prayer. Because this wasn't just construction. This was memory. This was legacy. This was a promise kept for someone who never made it home. The next morning, the notice was gone, torn off the post. No one could have done that. Someone had been close. Too close. Footprints in the soil. A cigarette but near the trench. He walked the perimeter in silence. Checked every bolt, every panel. Then he saw it, across the street, behind tinted glass. A black SUV parked where no one ever parked. No plates. No sound. Just waiting. He didn't panic. Didn't wave. Just nodded once. The passenger window lowered an inch. A hand slipped out, holding nothing but a small badge. He turned and walked back to the structure. Hammer in hand. Each step deliberate. Though I thought they'd stopped him. They had no idea what they just walked into. The badge was gone by the time he turned around. SUV vanished, as if it had never been there. But it was enough. The message was clear. They were watching, and not just him. Inside, the blueprints sat open under a single bulb. Lines, angles, calculations, etched with the kind of precision that comes from loss. This wasn't a project for profit. It was a mission handed down from the dead. 2 years ago, his brother bled out in a ravine 7,000 miles from here. Combat engineer. His last message, if something happens, you finish it. You promise me. They'd planned it together. In a cabin up north with beers and maps spread across the table. A flood barrier that could hold back a once-in-a-century surge. One that had already destroyed 3 towns in the last decade. It wasn't just a wall. It was protection. For people who'd never know their names. After his brother died, the state contacted him quietly. Said they'd approve it. Fund it. Keep it off the books. But it had to stay quiet. Politics, land disputes, bureaucratic red tape. The kind that kills good ideas before they're born. So they made a deal. He'd build it. On land he already owned. No media. No local oversight. Total discretion. Until the HO stepped in. They didn't know what he was building. Not really. They just saw concrete, rebar, trucks that came in at night and left before dawn. It made them nervous. Nervous people make noise. And now the noise was spreading. He found a drone buzzing low the next day. Someone piloted it from the park bench across the street. The camera didn't even flinch when he looked straight at it. He didn't bother chasing it. Let them film. Let them wonder. Later, he found a blog post. Local gossip site. Grainy photos. Big red headline. Man builds underground bunker in quiet subdivision. The article spun wild theories. Militia compound, doomsday prepper, illegal weapons cache. The HOA president commented directly, applauding community vigilance. He closed the tab without a word. But the damage was already done. By nightfall, reporters were circling like birds. Microphones shoved through chain link gaps. Questions screamed from behind headlights. He stayed inside, lights off, hands shaking over the sink. They weren't just guessing now. They were certain he was hiding something. And he was. Just not what they thought. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. A man's voice on the other end. Come. Low. You've been exposed. Do not engage. We'll handle it. Then silence. He looked back at the wall. The blueprints were still there. But suddenly they felt like evidence. Not legacy. Outside, the HOA held a late meeting. Folding chairs, flashlights, muttering neighbors. Lisa stood at the center, playing leader. She promised legal action. Promised the project would be stopped. She called it dangerous. Said it threatened property values. What she didn't say was that she'd already filed a claim to expand her private development right up to his lot. That she'd been waiting to buy him out for months. That the delay was her profit. And someone finally noticed. Greg, a quiet board member, approached him the next day. Alone. Nervous. He leaned in, eyes darting. She doesn't care about what you're building. She just wants your land. She's planning condos. There's paperwork. I can show you. He handed over a thin file folder. Inside, property surveys, city permit requests under a shell corporation. Lisa's name never appeared, but her husband's did. So did the date she joined the HOA board. He didn't speak, just nodded once. Greg hesitated before leaving. They think you're just some stubborn builder. But if they knew who really approved that structure. He left the rest unsaid. He looked at the folder again, then out the window. The press had left. For now. But the blog post was still up. Spreading. His phone buzzed again. This time a message. 4 words. Too exposed. Shut it down. He closed the phone. Walked outside. He grabbed the hammer again and kept building. The wind picked up that night, thick with dust and static, like something in the air was trying to warn him. But he kept going. Each strike of the hammer was louder than before, harder, like it wasn't building anymore, like it was fighting back. Across the street, porch lights flicked on one by one. Curtains moved. Phones pointed through windows. The neighborhood didn't sleep anymore. They watched him like he was a fuse ready to blow. He didn't care. Because with every brick he set, he saw his brother's face. Not the soldier in uniform, the kid who used to sketch dams on napkins, who once stood in a flooded town and said, "One day, we fix this." Now that promise was buried in silence. And every time the HOA sent another letter, another complaint, another threat, it just made him dig deeper. The next morning, the permits were revoked. No explanation. No hearing. Just a formal letter posted to his mailbox, HOA seal stamped in red. The city had reevaluated the land use agreement. Immediate stop order enforced. All work beyond this point considered unlawful. He took it off the post, folded it once, and slid it into the fire pit. That evening, 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up the hill. Lights off. Doors stayed closed. The deputies didn't get out. They just waited. Their presence alone enough to send a warning. He stood at the edge of the structure, boots on concrete, arms crossed. Behind him, the foundation yawned open, steel reinforcements glinting like bones under moonlight. The cruisers waited 5 minutes, then 10. Then they left. He didn't move until their tail lights disappeared. The next day, the sabotage started. Cement bags slashed, copper wiring stripped, a water pipe cracked, flooding part of the site. Someone had come during the night, not to protest, not to warn, to destroy. He installed cameras. Real ones this time. Motion-triggered, silent, infrared. He reviewed the footage just after midnight. Two figures. Hooded. One taller. The other moved like she had something to prove. They cut through the fence like they'd done it before. Walked straight to the supplies. No hesitation. Professionals. He paused the video. Zoomed in. A ring on her finger. Silver. Oval emerald. He'd seen it before, on Lisa's hand during every HOA meeting. So this was war now. He made one call. Same number. Same voice. I need options. The reply came fast. Document everything. We'll escalate. But do not engage. He hung up. Went to the shed. Pulled out a case buried beneath tools and oil-stained tarps. Inside, an old service laptop, black case, military issued. He booted it up, fingers typing code faster than they had in years. He wasn't just a builder. Before the concrete, before the blueprints, he designed infrastructure under fire. Combat-grade barriers for flood zones and frontline encampments. He knew how to defend perimeter. But now he needed to expose the ones trying to bury his work. He uploaded the footage, archived every permit, every contract, every email from the state. Created a digital lockbox. Time-triggered release. If anything happened to him, the truth would flood out faster than they could contain it. He didn't sleep. By morning, the footage had already been leaked. Not by him. Someone anonymous. Someone inside. The video hit the local news. Headline: HOA president caught trespassing on private property. The comments section exploded. Neighbors divided. Some defended Lisa. Others called her corrupt. Her face was blurred, but the ring gave her away. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Closed doors. No press. No members allowed. But he didn't need to be inside, because one of them had finally flipped. Greg left a voicemail. Breathing hard. It's not just the HOA. Lisa's tied to a development firm. They're planning to drain the creek behind your property. Redirect water flow. They need your land. You're the last holdout. He stood outside in the wind, voicemail still playing. The structure behind him was only half finished. But now he understood this wasn't just a local dispute. They wanted to erase what he'd built, what he was building it for. And he was done playing defense. This time, he was going to make the next move. The morning after the leak, Lisa didn't show up to the HOA meeting. Her car was gone. Her phone disconnected. But the whispers started fast. Claims of harassment, damage control, lawyers circling like sharks. The ring had done more than expose her. It cracked her perfect mask wide open. But he knew she wasn't running. She was regrouping. He doubled security, motion lights, backups, sensors buried in the soil like landmines. Anyone who crossed that line wouldn't just be seen. They'd be recorded, identified. Then came the envelope. No stamp, no return address, just left on his doorstep. Inside, 2 photos. One of his construction site, the other of him walking into his house the night before. Both taken from a long lens, both from high ground. The message was clear. They were watching from above. He scanned the treetops along the ridge behind the property. Nothing, just wind and pine. But someone was out there. He uploaded the photos, geotagged them. The metadata was stripped. Whoever took them knew what they were doing. Military level. So this was bigger than the HOA now. That evening, headlights cut through the fog. A black Jeep idled at the end of the road. Tinted windows, unmarked. No one stepped out. No one knocked. He watched from the second floor, hand resting near the drawer he never opened. The Jeep stayed 30 minutes, then vanished. The next day, Lisa returned. She stood at the edge of the site again, but not alone this time. A man stood beside her. Clean suit, mirrored sunglasses, government posture. He didn't speak, just scanned the area like it belonged to him. Lisa handed over another envelope. This one was official. State seal. Cease and desist again. Only this time it wasn't from the HOA. It was from the Department of Environmental Management. He opened it slowly. Read every word twice. They were claiming environmental impact violations, unauthorized water flow disruption, potential habitat destruction. None of it was true. He had the maps, the signed green light from the hydrology team, the permit stamped and countersigned by a state engineer whose name was suddenly redacted in the new file. He made another call. This time, no answer. The line went dead. That night, a low drone hummed outside his window. Different model this time. Commercial grade. Bigger. Louder. He didn't flinch. He walked into the yard, eyes locked on the buzzing machine above. Held up his phone. Filmed it. Let them know, whatever they were recording, he was recording too. Then came the text. No name. Just numbers. You go public, the funding disappears. He didn't respond, because he finally understood what they were protecting. It wasn't nature. It wasn't zoning. It was control. If he finished the project, it would stop the creek reroute, preserve the natural flood path, make Lisa's luxury development impossible, expose years of illegal land deals and corrupt partnerships wrapped in nonprofit names and fake green initiatives. He didn't want to fight, but they forced his hand. So he took the gloves off. He uploaded every document to a secure server, contract clauses, blueprints, footage, whistleblower testimony. Set a trigger. If the site was breached again, it would go live. Full release. Media, federal oversight, open source. He didn't tell anyone. Then he went back to work. Bare hands. Dry cement. No crew. Just him and the ghost of a promise. The trench was deeper now. Reinforced. Days from final pour. That's when the generator failed. He ran to the shed. Cut wires. Burnt fuse. The copper was melted. Sabotage. Precision overload. And in the ash, he found it. A matchbook. Branded with a name he hadn't seen in years. The same private contractor that built his brother's forward base. The one that collapsed in the flood. The same company Lisa's development firm now partnered with. It was never just about the land. It was about covering the past. And if they were willing to bury his brother once, they wouldn't hesitate to do it again. But this time, he was ready. This time, they'd have to come through him. The rain hit just past midnight. Hard, violent, like the sky itself was warning him. The floodplain lit up on the satellite overlay, water levels rising faster than forecast. The creek behind the ridge was overflowing, exactly as his brother had predicted. Exactly why the structure needed to be finished. But he wasn't alone anymore. Headlights again. 3 cars this time. 1 black SUV, 1 white van, and a gray sedan with no plates. They parked just outside the property line. Doors opened. 6 men stepped out. No uniforms. No words. He recognized one. The man in the suit. The one beside Lisa. Only this time, he wasn't observing. He was commanding. They crossed the fence like it wasn't there. Flashlights off. Tactical movement. Straight toward the foundation. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He walked out into the open, hands steady, voice calm. You're trespassing. This is private land. The lead man didn't answer. Just gestured. 2 of them broke off toward the generator, 2 toward the trench. He moved first. Grabbed the flare gun from under the tarp. Fired once, straight into the sky. The red trail screamed into the dark, casting shadows across every surface. The invaders froze. Not because of the flare. Because behind them, headlights appeared again. But not black SUVs this time. Marked trucks. State emergency response. And behind those, the press. Someone had triggered the backup plan. The footage. The files. The permits. Everything. And someone had leaked it all. Lisa's voice cut through the static of the wind, desperate and sharp. Call them off. They weren't supposed to see this. You said it wouldn't leak. But it had. Live feeds were broadcasting. Journalists flooded the scene. The exposed trench, the sabotage generator, the matchbook. Every piece of evidence now public. And then came the whistleblower. Greg stepped out of the shadows, folder in hand. He walked past the cameras, past Lisa, past the men in black. He handed the documents to a state official. Stamp signed, verified. Greg spoke, loud enough for the press mics to pick up every syllable. They tried to bury the past. They tried to silence his brother. But they forgot. Some things are built to last. The official turned to Lisa. You falsified environmental concerns, redirected water illegally, partnered with contractors under investigation. That's not just civil liability. That's federal. Lisa didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because the badge came next. Real this time. A federal marshal stepped forward. Hands on cuffs. The men in black didn't resist. They knew the operation was over. As Lisa was led away, her ring caught the light one last time. The emerald now dulled, smeared with dirt and rain. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He walked to the trench. The storm raged on, but the structure held. Water surged around it, diverted perfectly, flowing into the basin like it was designed to. Because it was. He knelt beside the concrete, pressed his hand to the cold surface. This wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering. His brother's voice echoed in his mind. One day we fixed this. And now he had. Reporters swarmed, asking questions, shoving cameras, begging for comment. He gave them nothing. Just one quiet sentence, spoken under the storm. Let the work speak for itself. And then he turned away from the noise, the lights, the chaos. Back to the foundation. Back to the promise. Because while they tried to stop him, he built through the storm. The rain didn't stop. It just changed its rhythm, softer now, as if the storm had said what it needed to say. The construction site stood still. Not because it was abandoned, but because it had finally been seen. By morning, the news had gone national. HOA corruption, federal land abuse, suppressed state contracts, veterans silenced. The headlines hit like thunderclaps. But he didn't care about the coverage. He cared that the structure was still standing. The stormwater flowed exactly where it was supposed to. No backup. No flood. No casualties. For the first time in decades, the hillside held. The foundations his brother dreamed of, real, tested, and now unstoppable. The calls started rolling in. Engineers from 3 different states. Disaster response leaders. Even veterans advocacy groups. All asking the same thing. Can we build more? He said nothing. Because before anything moved forward, he had to visit the one place he'd avoided since the permits were approved. Grave. It wasn't in a national cemetery. It wasn't draped in medals or plaques. Just a simple stone. Name, rank, dates. No fanfare. No glory. He knelt down slowly, rested a piece of steel from the build at its base, and whispered into the earth. We finished it. Just like you said. Behind him, a figure approached. Greg. He didn't speak at first. Just stood in silence, letting the weight of it land. Then, finally, they're indicting Lisa. The firm, too. Environmental fraud, conspiracy, property interference. You'll probably be asked to testify. He nodded. Oh, well. Greg hesitated. The state wants to rebuild the flood network. Not just the dam. Everything. Creeks, barriers, even the tech behind your model. You up for that? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded blueprint, weathered and creased. His brother's original sketch. Tell them we already started. He turned back toward the road. The same neighbors who once filmed from behind curtains now stood at the edge of their lawns. Quiet. Watching. Some holding their kids. Some holding signs. Thank you. We're sorry. One boy stepped forward, maybe 8 years old, holding a hand-drawn picture of the structure with bold letters at the top. HOA can't stop heroes. He took it. Kneeling down, he smiled, not with pride, but something heavier. Something rooted in survival, in scars, in unfinished grief finally given shape. You build so others don't have to suffer. And then he stood again. The boy nodded, ran back to his mother, who was crying, even though she was smiling. The gray sedan from before was back. Only this time, it didn't park in the shadows. A government official stepped out. Real badge. Real authority. We'd like to commission a full project. Based on your specs. Emergency grade flood redirection. Military integrated. He blinked. Why now? Because it worked, the official said. And because the world needs builders more than ever. That night, he returned to the site. Alone again, but not empty. He walked along the concrete path, now dry and solid, rain flowing beside it in perfect curves. At the far end, he set down a single plaque. No names, no titles, just one line. Built in memory, built for all. He turned off the lights. Let the silence settle. The storm had passed. The fight had ended. But the work, that never stops. The seasons shifted. Grass returned where the trench once tore through dirt. Birds nested along the new creek edge. The land began to heal, not because it forgot, but because it remembered what it was built for. And so did he. The structure was no longer just a wall. It was a barrier with purpose. A symbol that stood against greed, negligence, and the kind of silence that buries people before the dirt even touches the casket. Now it stood for something else. A school trip arrived one morning. Dozens of students, boots muddy, eyes wide. Their teacher explained the science, the engineering, the storm simulation data. But they only half listened. They were drawn to the plaque. Built in memory. Built for all. A girl raised her hand. Who was it built for? The teacher paused, glanced toward him standing by the edge of the site. He didn't interrupt. He just watched as she answered, her voice soft but clear. For someone who didn't give up, even when everyone told him to stop. The girl nodded. Like it made sense now. Like maybe she'd carry that line with her into her own battles someday. Later that week, a letter arrived. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a photo. It was him and his brother, taken years ago, standing on a ridge, blueprint in hand, laughing under the summer sun. On the back, scribbled in faded ink, told you we'd finish it. He sat down, let the photo rest in his palm, let the ache bloom again, but this time, not from loss, from completion. He hung it inside the site cabin, next to a set of keys and the original sketch. No frame, no fancy case, just there, honest, true. Time passed, but the visitors didn't stop. Engineers, veterans, families displaced by past floods. They all came, walked the path, touched the stone, asked the same question. How did you keep going? He never gave them a long answer. Just looked them in the eye and said the only thing that ever mattered. Because it wasn't about me. And somehow they always understood. One morning, the state held a ceremony. Awards, speeches, cameras. But he stood off to the side, boots dusty, arms crossed. When called forward, he stepped up without hesitation. Took the microphone. Spoke into silence. This wasn't supposed to be a victory story. It was supposed to be a warning. A line drawn in dirt that said, no more shortcuts, no more buried truths. He paused. This was for the ones who built before us, who were ignored, erased, lost. He raised the medal handed to him. Heavy, polished. But he didn't keep it. He handed it to a young cadet standing in uniform nearby, a volunteer who'd helped with the final cleanup. This is yours now, he said. Your turn to carry it forward. And the crowd, quiet at first, rose to their feet. Applause. Not for the man, but for the message. That when systems fail, people don't have to. That when a storm comes, you build. Not to block the water, but to give others a place to stand. That night, he stood alone again, looking out at the now quiet land, the stars above like pinholes through the dark. The wind moved gently through the trees. He could almost hear his brother's voice, not in his ears, but in his chest. Still here, still building. He smiled, then walked back toward the path, ready for whatever came next. Because the foundation was strong, and the storm would never win again. Like, share, subscribe,